often said that we cannot go back and change the past. And while on a real surface level, I think that's pretty makes sense, right? But what happens what happens when you are in a relationship with someone and you find out that they've betrayed your trust? When you find out that the girl that you thought was the answer to all your prayers was actually a nightmare? What happens then? I think a lot of times, most times, if not all times, what happens in those moments is we lose our footing in reality. And what we thought was the truth, what we thought was our experience from the past, all of a sudden it changes. All of the things that maybe we had a gut feeling about, or a question about, or we believed a lie about, but instinctively we knew. All of those things come storming back. And in those moments, the past changes. Now, it doesn't change in a real sense, but in a real sense, it kind of does. Because when these things happen to us, especially when we invest a lot into another person or an experience, when these things come to an abrupt end and a light is shed on a darkness that we didn't know was there, it makes us question everything. And for men, this is really, really hard because a lot of times men throw themselves into relationships full-heartedly and fool-heartedly without properly vetting something that's appealing physically. Many men find themselves lying in bed with vipers. Now, my message, the continuance of my message, isn't to focus on hypergamy or women's nature. What my message is for men is to take a look in the mirror and try to really figure out why, how, when we became this person who invited these things into our lives. Because no matter how much we want to find someone to blame, the decisions and the choices that we make inevitably and ultimately fall back on our own heads. And until we figure these things out, until we figure out what part of us is so fractured or broken that we invite this type of trouble, chaos, and adversity into our lives, the only thing that we can do is put a Band-Aid on a mortal wound and repeat the same mistakes over and over again. That's not what we're about here. Because this is what happens when you do that. When you don't deal with yourself, when you don't figure out why it is that you bring these things into your life, you will continue to do it. And like a fool, you will continue to make the same choices, the same decisions, the same mistakes, believing that you changed something because you got a 12-step program showing you how to be an alpha, or you got a PUA's program about how to cold approach women, or whatever the bullshit methodology was that you learned to trick or bandage, patch up your inherent weakness as a man. Now, again, they say that you cannot change the past, but I would postulate that almost all men who find themselves coming into the manosphere and absorbing red pill content, all of us would serve ourselves well to ask ourselves, what made me this weak? What made me this blind? How did I get to the point where I didn't see myself being flanked by this monster? Now, for my own growth, what it took was years and years and years of focusing on external things. I had a real firm grasp of how my upbringing, how it formed who I was. I had a real firm grasp, and I had a direction where I could point to put blame and rightfully so in many times, to put blame on the circumstances or the people who didn't do what they were supposed to do. But when you know why or how things happen and you still continue to make the same drastic decisions for your life, it means you haven't yet hit the core. You haven't yet found the real answers. And for myself, it was in the blessing of a woman who was mirroring everything that was wrong with me as a man. Everything that I had dished out to people in my own personal gratification. Everything that I had done, the lies that I told, the manipulation, all of the things, all of the horrible things that I did, they were all dealt back to me in spades. But this time, instead of being blind to it, my intuition told me the truth about everything that was going on. And I found myself returning to this well of poison over and over again and unable to get out of it, and I didn't know why, because I'm not a weak person at all. But I found myself powerless to release myself from the grip of this demon. And I'm not saying that this woman was a demonic person, but the forces that I was dealing with, the lessons that I was being taught, they weren't being given to me by a mere mortal. This person in her own journey in life had attached things to her soul through her own brokenness. And those two forces collided when our relationship happened. And until I learned the lesson, until I found the core of why I was making those decisions, I couldn't go. I couldn't go, and the person that I became disgusting to me. I couldn't stand the man that I saw in the mirror because he was fucking weak. Weak over a person that had absolutely nothing to offer, and I was powerless to release myself from the grip. No matter what I tried, nothing worked. And one day I found myself feeling this feeling of despair, this lonely, desperate feeling, waiting for mom to come home. And that feeling was so embedded in who I was. I had hidden it and I had buried it under mounds and mounds of false masculinity and bravado and alpha chest pounding. But on the inside, I was a broken little dude. And in a whiskey-induced journey back into my past, I started pulling that string, trying to figure out where the fuck this was going. And I realized that my very first experience of women's nature, of a woman's willingness to do whatever it was that she needed to do to get by, to get a fix, to make herself feel validated in a moment, it didn't come with any of the girls that I was dating. Those were just the residue from what I had learned as a little boy. No, gentlemen, my very first experience with a woman's hypergamous nature and the truth that not all women have that motherly instinct to take care of and protect their children was with my own mother. My own single mother who had 4 children with the hopes of capturing the dudes who made those kids, desperately swinging from dude to dude, trying to find someone to stick, trying to find someone to take care of the responsibilities that the men before them refused to do. And that's where it began. That's where I learned how to stand and suffer and wait for a little bit of attention from the woman in my life. And in that moment, I began to change the past. And finding that little boy and finding that painful memory, those boxes and boxes of hurt and pain that I had stored away. As a man, I opened them and faced them. A lot of pain. But in opening those boxes and dealing with those traumas, I could clearly understand why and how I had chosen women who would do the same thing that my mother did to that child. Why I would stand in the fire and wait for myself to be consumed by it before I took the obvious signs and exhaled from situations that were obviously treacherous. Many, many men that I have dealt with, that I have worked with in my practice and in my gym have been fractured, broken, and completely destroyed by their mothers. This is what I would implore men to do. Ask yourself why and how you ended up making the decisions that led to you being destroyed at the hands of a woman. Not to negate what they did, not to take away any fault. But that's her battle to fight, not yours. You need to find out why you let the enemy inside your camp. Most times, you're going to find out that you've got boxes upon boxes stacked in dark rooms that you're really not conscious of. If you've making the same mistakes over and over again, the bad choices, no matter what band-aids, no matter what kind of fix, your money, your physique, becoming a high status man, none of this stuff matters. None of this will matter if inside of you is a broken child that is merely looking for attention from an errant mother. Men, we didn't get here by ourselves. We didn't teach ourselves these things. The best thing that we can do right now is go back, change the past. That way you can change the present and have the future that most men really in our souls truly want. A future of masculinity, of pride, of integrity, and most of all, love.